Hey, this is Brendan from Comic Con. Today in studio, I've got a guest. Well, not in studio, he's in Vegas, but in our virtual studio, I've got a guest, Steve Johnston. You know him as the toy expert on Pawn Stars. He's one of the owners of One of Us Comics in Las Vegas. He's also one of my co-hosts on a show that we do called Who the F is Frank? And this is Steve Johnston. Steve, how you doing this morning?
Good, man. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Didn't we just see each other?
Just a couple of days ago. Every week I get blessed with your presence and all of the absolute beautiful baseball attire that you wear on a regular
Yeah.
basis.
This is the
And,
new San
and by
Francisco City
beautiful, I
Connect.
mean this is opposite day. So, uh, it's the way it is. Look, Padres fan to Giants fan. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry.
You know what? It's interesting that both of our favorite teams, mine being the Giants, yours being the Padres, are in one of the best divisions of baseball right now. And so we poke at each other, but we both just love baseball. I've got nothing against the Padres really, but it's fun to poke back and forth. Giants, Dodgers, and Padres are having a hell of a season, and that's gonna be fun to watch for the rest of the season and then into the postseason and see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. Gives us something to banter back and forth about on a
Yeah.
regular basis. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on here. I think this conversation, kind of what you've, led me into what we'll be talking about today, I think is pretty interesting, and I hope it provides some insight for people.
Sure, and we've talked about tariffs almost ad nauseum on the show, and I thought that it would be good to just kind of like get into some of the details and how it affects an actual owner of a store who sells comics, who sells collectibles, a trader of comics and collectibles, an expert who's seeing the market values go up and down. Let's talk about comics first. Almost all American comics are made in Canada. That's Marvel, DC, Image, Boom Studios, Dark Horse Comics, Dynamite, IDW, Mad Cave Studios, Oni Press, and this 25% tariff really means a 50% or more increase on the cost of a comic book, which are already pushing $5 right now. What are you seeing with comic book sales with this uncertainty for the readers and for the collectors?
Well, I don't know that we've seen an immediate impact to this point because most of the stuff was kind of under the previous, right? But where I think the issue is going to lie is right now, as a purchasing from your distributor, you've seen distributor percentages go up, right? So essentially, it would be on certain types of titles. We might have paid a 50% of newsstand or 60% or 65% of newsstand. And you've seen a slight tick in some of that, not completely across the board, but some of them have raised the prices there. And I think for the most part, I think the distributors have been trying to wait this out. And when you wait something like this out, obviously there's going to be challenges, right? Whether it's you miss a lowest possible tariff you could have gotten on something, or on the flip side, an increase that wasn't expected, right? Which is kind of what I think the uncertainty that people had was just the fact that it was so not clear on,
Mhm.
is this going to be this for a while? Is this going to be the price today? Is this literally like a daily market check? Like I have to check and see what the tariffs are today. And I think that really fell to the manufacturer side and the distributor side, right? Because the manufacturer is the one that ultimately is dealing with this, individualized tariff. Then they're passing it on to the distributor then pass it on to us, then we pass it on to the consumer. So you can see it's four steps before it actually gets to where it's going to go. The number that I think that will be realized for the consumer, I don't think will be a huge impact in the world of comics. And, what are we talking about? A traditional book that would be $3.99 might be pushed to $4.99. And again, that's a big increase, but on a individualized, dollar basis,
Mhm.
I think a lot of us don't value a dollar increase on something like a huge disruption for us. But it's when you're purchasing, 30, 40, 50 books in a month, then yeah, you're going to start to see that increase affect you a little bit. I think on the end of comic books, I don't think it's as prevalent as it will be on, say, the supplies, the items that support things that come in a larger quantity bulk,
Mhm.
toys, those type items are going to see the bigger impact from the tariff situation.
Now we did see Distillery is they're like a boutique publisher. They have really great creators, and so they charge a lot for their comics. They're already $10, and we did see them try to do like a digital model earlier this year. We talked about on the show where they were doing different covers, and the A cover is available always, but then like the B cover, C cover, D cover were in limited quantities, and so it was almost like a token that could be traded. But I think that what they were trying to do is because the uncertainty in the market with the tariffs just going up and down all over the place, almost indiscriminately from day to day, is they were kind of trying to get out ahead of that and say, okay, well, if we're not doing physical media from Canada, how can we keep the cost down and still produce the product? And I think that we saw a little bit of some, dipping some toes in the water to see, what the temperature is from Distillery and a couple of the other companies. What do you think going forward? Is that going to, because I know a lot of people right now really don't like digital comics. The digital readers are not nearly as possible or as popular as a physical comic book. People like holding it in their hand. But do you think this is going to make the digital market, the PDF market, go up? Do you think that people, when those cost increases come, if they're $1 over an arc, you're talking about 12, 15 more dollars for the same story. And so I think people, and you were saying, when somebody's pulling 20 or 30 books in a month, that's a big difference for them as well. I'm interested to see what happens with the digital market.
Well, I have a take, and it's kind of a hot take across the board when it comes to retail in general, that, this world that we're in of, online and where our capabilities are from a technology standpoint is really going to change and trend how things are being done. Look, you can start looking across the board and I can pinpoint a bunch of things. And I think right now that the challenge is, it's not just the tariffs, right? It's AI, it's the capabilities of getting stuff out faster. There's a lot of things that are happening now where people want to consume content quicker, right? Your newspapers, we've watched our newspapers dissipate over the last 5 to 8 years, right? Now we're seeing that they're all on an online platform. 90% of your, and this isn't a factual number, but 90%, in my opinion, of your newspaper producers out there are no longer producing a high run daily paper. Right. It is now something that, they're probably sufficing a handful of newsstands, some, good old boy clubs that still have to get their delivered paper, but most people are just consuming their content online. And that's no different from shopping. That's no different from experiences and how we're connecting to even how we're learning, right? All of our stuff is now transitioning online. We don't learn in person anymore as far as, going out and going to a trade set and learning a skill set. We're doing that through, the channels that we can find, whether it's a YouTube video or, someone who's doing a masterclass, it doesn't matter. Those things are all happening. And I bring this up because I think it's so important to get into where comics could be, because I do believe that there's going to be a consumption side to comics at some point that is going to become a very prevalent force online. And that is the ability for the reader just to use the online portion as their fundamental way to read the comic, right? So with that being the case, I would believe that what you'll end up finding out is that the consumer then is not going to say support the bulk number of comics that are printed, and you're going to see a smaller set run of comics long term. So you'll start to see a lesser quantity out there. And once that lesser quantity is out there, I think that's going to be the challenge. And look, you can look across the board. I don't care what market you're in right now. Comic shops are closing, right? I think this is a very prevalent thing. And this is not just a one-time thing. This is not something that's just a normal cycle that occurs, that you see closures of pop culture style businesses on a regular basis. And the reason for this is because the consumable market is pushing into online, right? Think about how important it is for us to now have our products online as well as in stores. Your store is no longer just the focal point of support. And outside of those established brands that have just been, stapled for years, that are just going to have those, constant traffics, they're not going to see the massive impact, but you will ultimately. So when you see a company like Distillery going out, creating a online platform concept, and I think that if they do it the right way, make the content a little less available. You and I talked in particular about the possibility of maybe, NFTing these type of items that create, you know, a limited number, create a certain number on the blockchain. That's all there is. It has to be a, you know, transferred tangible asset. You can't just copy it, right? Those things I think will be the challenge. And the world that we have right now is we have so many moving parts in it. That's where the problem is. It's hard to settle on where everything's going to fall, right? Yeah, you've got AI over here, and AI is creating a whole new segment and set of how people are creating and intaking, you know, consumable content and information, how they're creating marketing and, you know, ultimately producing things like comics and you know, even images into created products, right? So from that standpoint, I think you're going to see places go to that, but it is going to take some time, and it's going to take one of the major publishers to really like get the ball rolling, because it's not going to fall on one of the small guys. One of the small guys can open the door, give them the idea, kind of give them a baseline, but ultimately that large, you know, publisher is going to be the biggest important part, because they're going to have the biggest amount of titles, right? They're going to have the largest amount of consumable, you know, content to produce and create. So I think that the challenge that they really run into is just, how is that going to go? And then how do you factor that into two sides? The one thing I'll tell you is that the market is not going to go away for comic books, right? We love to collect. We love to have tangible items. We love to have tangible assets. I think where it's really going to scale is when the tangible asset has, you know, for the lack of a better phrase, our friends at Neverland Labs uses a phrase called the digital sister, right? Which is essentially the, you know, the online component that goes with the physical component. And, you know, there's concepts in place. There's something that, you know, Neverland and myself have been in the works on, and, you know, to create a concept that's more of a protection of your asset, but it's still utilizing that online connection. And I think that ultimately those two things together, long term, will have to play together. But it's going to be how well they do with the production of their items that are physical to the content release digitally, in my opinion.
Sure. And you mentioned a couple terms there, and I want to clarify a couple things real quick. What Distillery is doing is an NFT, and NFT gets a really bad name because when people think of NFT, they think of proof of work, and that's the one that is burning computers all day long, doing equations and tearing up the environment. But when you talk about something that is just a digital thing on the internet that only you own, that's limited, that is tied to a proof of stake, which just means it's like provenance, like this person owned it, then this person owned it, then this person owned it. That solves a couple of problems. And one of those problems is compensation, which we're always talking about for comic book creators. And the other one is credit. So they're not getting credit for the work they're doing with a lot of AI models, and they're not getting compensation for it. But when you're doing a proof of stake NFT like Distillery is doing right now, the creators are getting paid, and then they have the ability every time that transfers for the creators to get paid again. And so it begins a different model for creators, I think, to step up and actually get more money for the same work that they're doing right now. So when we say NFT, we're not talking about the burning down the rainforest NFT. And I just want to be clear about that, because I'm not about any of that. But I do like what Distillery is modeling right now, and I think there's other companies that are going to start doing it.
Well, I think when you talk about NFT, and I think this is just important for people to understand, what you know about NFT from 5 years ago, you need to forget, right? Because that was really an unrealistic expectation. I mean, I sat there. Part of my problem with it was I just sat there seriously and said, people are so worried about what the value or what the worth of the NFT was. And I was more about what the tangible value is. What is the purpose for having it? Why do I need that? Why is it consumable to me? And so that answer has been made, and it's utility. And utility, for people that don't know what it is it's literally an add-on to the purpose of owning that specific thing. So if it's numbered to 50 and only 50 people have it, I could use a quick example, which was for a sports card show that we did, for a trade night, we did a free NFT that you could scan the QR code and download that free NFT. And we did this as like a proof of concept. And essentially what it was we wanted to see how many naturally people would just scan that code and take it. We didn't push it. We didn't market it. We didn't tell people it was going to be there. You walked in and you saw it, right? We had 79 downloads that night. Of 79, that was about 2,000 people there. Doesn't sound like a ton of consumption, right? until you realize that that created a limited market. Because what we did is we took that NFT and then we told the holders of it, hey, by the way, this company that was involved with this trade night at this event is now hosting the National Sports Card Collector Convention trade night. And if you have this NFT is going to give you a line pass where 5,000 to 7,000 people get in line at one time for you to walk right by them and go find a spot to set up at trade night, which real estate and trade night is that's the value, right? It's the most valuable thing there.
The convention goers for comics, that would be like going into San Diego Comic-Con to the biggest convention, the Robert Downey Jr. announcement, and sitting in the front row because you got there first and that seat is open.
Yeah. And instead of that, because you hold this NFT, now that gives you the entry, right? So now that item has an exchangeable, tangible value. What is that value? Well, in our world, it became $500 was what those were exchanging for. So people were paying $500 on eBay and buying this, NFT from these people so they could have it when they go to the national and they could then use that to get into the trade night.
So the value is not from equations that a computer is doing because there's none of that involved in this. You said, here is a digital coupon, basically, that somebody got for free. And then when they were able to transfer it, the value is in it's in the experience. It's in the fact that later down the line, you're going to get to this thing. But when you bought it or when you got it for free, you didn't know that was going to happen later. It's a really cool thing. I liked that promotion, and that got me thinking about some other stuff. Let's talk about China, though. And the tariffs on China are very confusing right now because they were 25, they went up to 40, they went up to 140. They're back down to 40 now, but it's like it fluctuates so much. I've heard stories of, the storage shipping containers that you ordered 4 months ago at a 25% tariff coming in, and now it's 140, and now you've got a bill to pay before you can claim your goods of, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 more than when you ordered the product, and then they're dropping off again. So how is that affecting your business?
Well, I mean, I guess that's a two-parted thing. I guess the first thing is I'll go backwards. How it's affecting our business right now is that on any of the consumables that we're purchasing that are importing in, toys, plastics, protective products, which is, I have involvement with platinum protectors, and platinum protectors in particular. I have a little bit of a baseline to kind of give you a really good inside look of like what actually happens here. But what you're going to find on those items is that in order to keep things moving, right? And the discussion that I had recently, I was at Jada Toys in El Segundo, California. And I was talking with them, and we were having a discussion in particular about how this affects the potential for Christmas, right? Because see, this is how, as a manufacturer, you have to think. You're not thinking about the product today and me getting it in and where it affects a person today. You're looking at like, okay, long term, where does it put things? And we've already seen, because of how COVID affected the collectibles market, right? You had a ton of dead stock product that companies in the toy world, Hasbro, Mattel, that they ended up either having to reabsorb that product, wholesale it out to a liquidator, whatever it is, right? And we're seeing these liquidation companies are now coming with this product that got liquidated out back in, 2022, 2023. That was product that, because of COVID, we were sitting on. They had raised prices. And so I'll use Black Series Star Wars just as an example, because it's very easy to follow, which is prior to COVID, Black Series Star Wars figures on a retail peg would be somewhere between $18.88 and $19.99, depending on big box retailer, Walmart, Target, whoever it was, right? I think the highest at the pre-COVID price that you saw it was Toys R Us before their demise was at $21.99. Right? If you're a smaller retailer, by the time it hits a distributor and it gets to you, because you're not direct with, say, that manufacturer, you're going to end up paying for that item before shipping probably the same price or 10 or 15 cents cheaper than what Walmart or Target might put that item out at, right? So your balance in that type of business is you're getting the stuff direct, you're able to have it, you have to price it up a little bit more. So I believe at that time, while everyone was like $18.88 to $19.99, we were sitting at like $21.99, $22.99 to be able to be competitive as much as we could as a small retailer, but also have a little bit of margin, right? because you're missing traditional margins at that point. You're not getting those 18 to 22% new item traditional retail margins, right? You're sitting closer to like 15%, maybe 12. And what happens is in that moment, you saw an influx, you saw an increase, right? Well, then after COVID, right? And now the market's kind of corrected itself up. Consumers are back buying. People are going to shows. People are going to concerts. People are out and about again. They're going to dinners. They're doing these events, whatever it is. These things have all now fallen back into place. However, the manufacturers continued that model, right? Because now they found a value increase spot. Seemed like that would be sustainable and good for them. Seemed like that would work well. Then all of a sudden this tariff situation hits. Now when this tariff situation hits, now you've got another jump. So now you're already seeing that traditional number in the last, I would say 60 days, you're starting to see it creep up across the board on a bunch of places. You've had manufacturers or wholesalers, distributors that have put out information, hey, current orders are being increased in prices. As a retailer, you're sitting there and you have to start making decisions. Am I raising prices? Am I leaving prices down? Am I absorbing that higher cost of acquisition of my product? Or am I actually going to have to raise the price on consumer? Well, you're starting to see that it's a 50-50 coin flip. Some places want to raise prices, some don't. I think we had a video of Brian Volk-Weiss, from the Nacelle company that was out there that specifically was talking about they're not going to raise prices. Tells me that their cost of manufacturing to the retail point, and since they're primarily more retail direct or kind of a hybrid wholesale, they have a little bit more margin to work with. Whereas, say, a company like Hasbro, they may just have a lesser, margin to work with at this point because they're producing so many pieces, right? So the problem that you're going to find is it's not now. It's not going to be today. It's going to be, how does that affect your business moving forward? And especially when you start, in retail, look, that third quarter is key because you're starting to intake what's hitting for the fourth quarter, which is going to be the Christmas time period. And you're getting all of that product in. And what are you paying for that product coming in? Has that increased? Is there certain SKUs that you carry at a different time of year that is a natural SKU? I think of a retail store that carries pool noodles, right? When do they do it? Summertime, right? They put them out in summertime. How is that going to be affected now? Is the price of the pool noodle now going to be $5 instead of $3 because of the tariff increases and having to force containers during a time that you don't know what that point's going to be? So from a store standpoint, I think that what I anticipate is that I'm looking at what is our cost on new products like that going to be. And look, I mean, the safest thing in our world is we're built on a resale model with retail rather than being a retail model with some resale, right? The places that are a retail model, they've got a big uphill battle because they're going to have to figure out how much can they charge and what will the consumer pay. Because if right now the consumer's paying between $24 and $26 for that Black Series Star Wars figure, do you think they're going to pay $30? They might, but you're looking at an increase of almost 40% since pre-COVID. That's not even 10 years. I mean, that's a crazy number, but that's going to happen in this. It's going to happen in some of the other areas. I think you'll see, places like vape stores and stuff like that, where they're, small consumer electronics. Your consumer electronics stores are going to have effect like that. You're going to see the effect across the board in the big box stores. I think you'll see places like Costco will be packaging bulk items with less pieces in it to counter off. Right? Keep the price point the same, give you a little bit less. You're going to see these things occur. And that, I think, is going to be the challenge. The challenge for the retailer is purely going to come down to the fact that that person just has to figure out how they're going to be able to get the consumer to still stay engaged in the marketplace. Because we've already got, higher end action figures that are pushing the $50, $60 range that really are just additional articulation. They're not more plastic, more packaging,
or a different cape, or a couple more weapons, or
and they go to a soft good instead of a plastic good. They go whatever it is. Those used to be that $35 item. They're now selling for $50, right? And I think of this Ultimate Spider-Man that Hasbro's doing as a really good example.
Christ, that thing's beautiful, isn't it?
Great figure, awesome piece. It's going to sell like crazy. Pre-sales have sold really well for it, different places. But that item in particular, I'm going at $50. Like, where's that? Where's that mark where the consumer puts their foot down, right? Mm-hmm. Because when the consumer drives a marketplace like this, which they did in sports cards, they'll accept any price because the consumer's driving the bus. But when the manufacturer is driving the bus, that's where the issue is. So on the first part of that question, I know it was a long answer, but I thought it was very important to really articulate like the challenges that a retailer has and the steps to get through. Because if you think of it, if you go through the distributor, the consumer is a fourth person. So by the time it gets there, see, normally the distribution model of, business is wholesale, store, consumer, 3 people. But now you add a fourth person. How do the slices of the pie work out? How does that make sense? So I think that by itself is important. On the flip side, with your question in regards to the tariff situation and everything, I'll use Platinum Protectors, which, Platinum Protectors does protective products for trading cards, for collectibles, toys, comics, sports cards, bags and boards. When it comes to toys, acrylic products, whatever it is. We particularly had an order that was placed, I want to say September, October. This order was placed, and it was to be finished right around Chinese New Year. And if it gets done right before Chinese New Year, it'll hit the dock and leave. But if it misses Chinese New Year, you've got 3 weeks where essentially in China, you don't have a lot of people working, right? They're not producing product. So because they're not producing that product, it now takes longer. And on top of it, everything stops. So
it jams up the pipeline.
Right? Exactly. Your distribution, shipping, all of that stuff is now, challenged. So what has happened here with this tariff situation is that you have something similar to that, but on a longer level. Because now what's happening is imagine it's no longer the manufacturers taking the time off. It's the consumer who's actually purchasing the product saying, hold my order. I'm not quite ready for it. And then the next guy goes, hold my order. I'm not quite ready for it. Hold my order. I'm not quite ready for it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But what you've got is you've got this backup of containers. This is the first thing. This is already going to challenge the supply chain, right? Because now products, and you're already starting to see it. I saw Funko push out something yesterday. They said, unfortunately, we're canceling a SKU for such and such, right? One of our retailer partners might pick it up. Well, why? Because they don't want to pay for the cost of that container being shipped over. Right. So now they're like, well, what do we do? For us at Platinum, it was very simple. And this is the easiest way to equate it. We had an order that we placed before any of the tariff situation was in there. By the time it hit the dock after Chinese New Year, and it was sitting there, when we started to look at what our tariffs are going to be when it hits the port of LA, right? Our tariffs initially were supposed to be around $10,000 for that container. Right? Pretty standard, already factored into the cost of product, everything. At one point, we almost moved on the container coming out at 28% tariff. We almost moved it then, and then we didn't do it. And then it bombed, and then immediately went to 130%. When it was at 130% tariff, our bill was over $140,000 for the tariff fee. So if you're a small business, and Platinum's a small business, right? Look, it's got a nice big brand, but unfortunately, it's a small business. I mean, it's operated within 3 to 5 people, right? Run that operation, and the problem that they run into, and the situation we have now. What do you do? Because a lot of this product, you take pre-orders. That's how you move this in the first place. You take pre-orders and deposits that allow you to pay for product to be able to move it, right? Unless you're sitting on a huge bankroll, this. It's hard to be feasible. So what do? Just like everyone else, froze the container. Unfortunately, we got to wait for this product and see if it balances itself out. Well, we just started moving it. When the tariff dropped to 30%, we instantly said, get it. Because what it's happening is it's not sitting in China. These barges have moved and they're sitting in the port of LA.
That's a point that I didn't know, is that it's when you claim it that you pay the tariff for that day.
But, I think ultimately getting things back moving is going to be good. And look, the tariff situation is a necessary evil, unfortunately, right? We don't realize it because generally on a consumer level, these negotiations are, 1, 2, 3% points. We're not negotiating 30, 40, 50% points. The problem that we're running into, and important in this world of comics, toys, and, original properties, is IPs being stolen. And that's ultimately the biggest issue, is that there's no regulation in China on when I make something there, that they steal it, reproduce it, package it different, and put it out in the marketplace, right? So that's the biggest fighting point that our government's having with China, is they want regulation on it. Well, it sounds like China is finally in that we'll work on regulation, and we're going to work on trying to make it happen. That, I think, ultimately will benefit everybody across the board. It will probably lower the tariff cost. It could even lower it less than what it was previously, because then it's going to encourage us to consume more and to produce more, right? Because now we're not competing with knockoffs and fakes and all of this. And so I think, look, as negative as this has in the impact on the marketplace, it also does have the right place to be. It's just the way it was handled was not planned. No one could foreshadow it. And look, just like COVID,
there was not a lot of warning giving to the consumer or the retailers. And the thing is like the manufacturers aren't feeling it. It's the guys at the bottom of the chain that are feeling it. And that's you being the third guy on the line. That's me being the fourth guy on the line. So we could talk about this all day long. I did say we're getting right to the end here, but we do talk about it a lot on the show because it affects a lot of the things that we talk about, because we talk about pop culture, we talk about toys, we talk about collectibles, we talk about comics, and this is going to hit everybody's pocket in different ways, but it's also it's fluctuating all over the place. And so it's a hard target to hit when you're talking about what the actual impact is going to be. So I guess we'll wait and see, but I really do appreciate you coming in and giving us your expert knowledge on the situation as, a toy trader and a retailer and somebody who's making product and somebody who's consuming product. You really have a unique perspective, and I really thank you for coming in and giving that to us today.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate you guys having me on. You guys do great work here. And of course, we get to work together on a regular basis too, which is fun as well. So, I'll tell all your viewers, don't miss a podcast because Frank, it's entertaining, it's fun, and not scripted.
It's definitely not scripted. All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
All right.